Hello! So today I thought that we would do a review and a discussion of Hummingbird Salamander by Jeff Vandermeer. Jeff Vandermeer is one of my favorite authors. I haven't read all of his work yet, but when this came out, I reserved it or put myself on the waiting list for it from the library, and I expected it to take like a year, but I actually got it fairly quickly, so I just finished it this past weekend. So the review will be totally spoiler-free. I'm probably giving away less than the cover does, and then the discussion will have a little bit more spoilers. I'll talk about that when we get there. There will be timestamps in case you don't want to watch the discussion. So just a very short summary of this book. Our main character is a security consultant, and she is given a clue anonymously that leads her into a winding, dangerous path of trying to find out the truth about a mystery that you get very limited information about. The things that I liked about it, the quality of the writing is always good. I think with Jeff Vandermeer, I really like his writing. What with it being a little bit more of a thriller, it is a little bit more straightforward writing than some of his other works. The last book of his that I read was Dead Astronauts, so I am coming off of a very trippy read, and this was obviously a lot more straightforward than that, but I still thought that he did a good job of capturing beauty in his writing. I think that that's really what he stands out for, is his nature descriptions. I think that they are incredible. I really liked that he pushed the boundaries of what you normally expect with a female character. I'll get into it more in the discussion, but she was not necessarily a likable character, but I thought that she was a very unusual female character, and I appreciated that he didn't go an expected route with a female main character. Another thing that I appreciated is, so I haven't read all of Vandermeer's earliest works. I have read the Area X trilogy, the Born series, and then now I've read this. So I still haven't read his earliest ones, and I haven't read A Peculiar Peril. But I feel like you're watching over the course of these three, the two series and then this one, you're watching him radicalize basically. So in Area X, it's kind of, there's a mystery and it's related to the environment, but you're not 100% sure what's going on. Born is very corporations are destroying the earth, and then this is eco-terrorism and stuff. So I think it's kind of been interesting, maybe this is me imposing my own learning journey on him, but I think it's been interesting to watch kind of him get more and more blatant with his views as the books progress. Things that I didn't like as much, I just really didn't buy the thriller aspect fully. The mystery just didn't really feel fully fleshed out to me. I know that he likes to keep things kind of unfinished, and that's totally fine, but there were definitely moments where I would have a little chills moment of oh man, danger or whatever. But all in all, it didn't have the teeth that I expect thrillers to have, I guess. This work, just I think by the nature of the setting and the plot, was a lot less connected to nature than his previous works, and that's kind of my favorite thing about his work and most works. So I didn't particularly connect with this one as much, but I think that that's just a personal preference thing. And kind of related to both of those two things, I didn't necessarily fully get what the point of this book was. I don't think that all books need to have a point, but at the same time, I feel like he was trying to make a point here, and I feel like I wasn't really getting it. I felt like Area X, it's supposed to be a thought experiment, I feel like I didn't necessarily get the point fully of Area X, but there were a lot of themes that I was oh yeah, that's a really interesting exploration of that theme, or it gave me ideas. And then Born, I felt like the point was very clear, and this one was kind of in the middle. He's very explicit about the topics that he's talking about. He talks about specific industries and specific types of companies, and it's all very out in the open, but at the same time I didn't really understand his conclusion necessarily. But I'm also not remotely saying that this book was pointless. It definitely wasn't, but it didn't ring clear to me, I guess, would be the best way to say that. So my overall opinion, I don't regret reading this. It's definitely not my favorite Vandermeer so far though, and I wouldn't recommend to start with this one unless specifically you don't like nature heavy books and you would rather read just like a thriller and maybe you need like a gateway into Vandermeer. Then maybe this would be a good one to start with, but otherwise I don't think it's very representative of his works, which is fine. You know, I think it seems like he was trying to branch out here, so he did. And it's not my favorite, but I still think it's a good book. It's a fine book. So, going into the discussion, I'm not going to spoil the point of the book. Like, I'm not going to spoil the mystery, but I will be talking about things along the plot that you might want to go in not knowing. If you're someone who doesn't mind knowing a lot of the plot going in, then carry on. So, the first thing that I wanted to talk about was just the unlikability of the main character. From what I read of reviews, when people didn't like this book, this was a major reason given for why they didn't like it. The main character is inarguably extremely unlikable. And I was definitely struggling with that until probably about halfway through the book. And then I just had a thought. I don't even remember why I thought it, but I was like, what if she was a male character? Like, I feel like I've read so many thrillers where there's like a detective main character or like a retired detective main character who is male and who behaves exactly this way. And you know he's an asshole. You are fully aware that he's an asshole and you're still kind of rooting for him, you know? You don't excuse it because you know that it's wrong, but you just kind of live with it. And I was like, you know what? I am just gonna live with it. What she's doing. Like, she's a terrible person. But like, I think that I read books where the male main characters are terrible people all the time, and I think about it in that I'm like, wow, that person's an asshole, but like, that's it. So I did think it was an interesting choice, and I wonder if that was an intentional choice on his part to emulate a male main character with her, which is something that I have mixed feelings on, because I think that there's a reason that often female characters are different than men, because women are socialized differently than men. But at the same time, I did think that that was an interesting choice on his part, and I did come to appreciate it after struggling with it for a while. I did struggle, especially to imagine why she would just throw her entire life away for this random tiny clue that was barely even a clue. It just didn't seem like something anyone would do. But as I progressed through the book and kind of got to know her better, I guess, I finally decided, like, she just wanted to. She didn't feel like she belonged in her life the way that it was, and she took her first out that she saw, basically. That was my interpretation, at least. There's no other reason that you would just throw your life away for the most ambiguous, unimportant thing that's only tangentially related to you. Like, it was the only thing that made sense to me, and based on the decisions that she made throughout the journey, like, she was obviously just a selfish person to her very core. The way that she endangered other people purely to save her own skin, and the way that she just abandoned her family. People were saying that her decisions didn't make any sense, and I agree that they don't unless you view it through that lens. It made sense once you viewed it from the perspective that that was what she wanted to do. So the other thing that bothered me was just how unresolved everything was, and possibly if I reread the book I would understand a lot more, but I still don't understand what happened. What Sylvina was and wasn't doing of the sketchy things that they discovered. Like, I just feel like he introduced so many things along the way that were so interesting, like poaching, and then they were just kind of abandoned, and I was like, wait, but I wanted to learn more about like that industry or whatever, and you just never did. And so that was something that, like, I wish that he had maybe just written a book about poaching or something like that, which, you know, maybe he's not the best person to write that book, but still, it was just, I felt unsatisfied because I wanted to know more about the things that he brought up. Like, it wasn't like I was unsatisfied with the book in general, it was just, it felt anticlimactic, I guess. I also just wanted to talk about this one line in the book that I actually think is incredibly beautiful, and I posted it on my Instagram when I read it, but then the more I thought about it, the more I just wanted to discuss it. So it's after she discovers the identity of the hummingbird, and then she reads about that species, and then this is like her reflections afterwards. Singing, dancing, beauty competitions. How to process this ethereal touch, this intel so at odds with my job, my life. Hadn't the hummingbird been a kind of miracle? Hadn't it diminished us not to see this as a miracle and protect it? And I think that that's beautiful, and the fact that our lack of relationship with nature, or our exploitative relationship with nature, reduces us as well as reducing nature, obviously. I think that that's such an important thing to internalize. But once I thought about it more, the idea of hadn't it diminished us not to see this as a miracle and protect it, just really, it does feel a little bit paternalistic, I think. The idea of protecting it when it's like, well, it's only us that it needed protecting from. So maybe it's not so much protecting as it is just stopping. Like, just stopping what we're doing. I saw a TikTok or a reel, I can't remember, that pretty much perfectly encapsulates this. I'll link it and maybe include some of it, but it's like about the idea that women need to be protected from men and by men, and it's like, no, like, you can't protect us because you are the problem. It's the problem. Like, instead of getting this idea that you are one of the good ones who's going to protect us as a species or as a gender or whatever it is, stop thinking of yourself as the solution and start thinking of yourself as the problem, and think about what you need to do to change that. So I think that that is something that's complicated to navigate, and this is something that I think of often in my own, you know, journey with my race. I think it's something that we, whoever the privileged people are in a situation, don't think about enough, because you are the default, and so you don't think that you need to think about yourself. You think you need to think about the people that need protecting, but it's maybe not the best way to approach it. So I still think it's a beautiful line and a beautiful sentiment, but it was something that stood out to me, that I have that mindset myself often, and I know many other people that do, and it's maybe something that we need to adjust a little bit. I will end on what I think was my absolute favorite thing about the book, was the discussion of how once you've started to notice these things, you can't stop. He writes about the main character starting to notice everything, starting to notice all of the cruelty that's happening around her, even things as mundane as roadkill, you know, just the impact that we have that we never even think about it. We just consider it basically like the cost of doing business, the cost of living, and how once you've started to notice those, you can't really go back to not noticing it. I thought that that was really accurate, at least for me, and I think it's something that we need to do more as a society. So the like undercurrent of that running through the novel was, I think, my favorite thing about it. So I would love to hear your thoughts, whether you have or haven't read this. Are you going to? What did you think about it? Discuss. And if you would like to hear more from me, then feel free to subscribe. Thank you.